Thanks for coming to my tech talk. Today I'm going to be talking about self-driving cars and its social implications. To start off, I'm going to give you a little roadmap. So I'm going to talk about the what and the why of autonomous vehicles, sort of the technology behind it and the reasons why various companies are currently pursuing it, the market and its slowing rate of growth, the social implications, sort of what caused the slowdown in the market, and also the future that autonomous vehicles hold for us and what we should be expecting. So I'm going to start off by talking briefly about the technology. So the cameras, they produce 2D images. It allows the car to spot things like traffic signs, lanes on a highway. The LiDARs, which is short for light detection and ranging, they build 3D maps of the surrounding environment by shooting a bunch of laser beams every second and measuring how long it takes to bounce back. And the additional lasers on the front are there to detect objects that are close by and also to detect things in blind spots. The radar sensors at the back emit radio waves to see the surrounding environment and are especially good at detecting metallic objects, so it aids in detecting other vehicles that are on the road. And the software component is machine learning. So in very simple terms, machine learning is getting a computer to be able to make real-time decisions by continuing to learn from past and present data. So things like navigation and movement planning are made possible through machine learning. So now that we know a little bit about what autonomous vehicles are, I'm going to move into, well, why should we care? Why do companies pursue autonomous vehicles in the first place? So the first is safety. There are around 1.3 million people who die from car crashes every year, and about 90% of these crashes are caused by human error. So since self-driving cars take away the need for human decision-making, it's estimated that around 1 million lives will be saved annually with the implementation of self-driving vehicles. The second reason is convenience. Driving is something that takes up a lot of time for some people, and with automation, time spent focusing on the road can be reduced and we can spend it doing other important tasks. It also increases accessibility for those who can't currently drive due to disabilities. And the last reason is that it's greener than what we currently have. It's also predicted that there will be fewer cars on the streets as owning cars become less and less common due to autonomous vehicles being available for public use on the streets, and autonomous vehicles also run electrically. So now that we know what and why, I'm going to talk about the market and what has been going on there. So I'm not going to go super in depth in terms of numbers, but it's estimated that the autonomous vehicle market will be worth $60 billion by 2030. That's a pretty big market. However, the progress surrounding autonomous vehicles is actually much slower than anticipated. So in 2016, big names like Toyota, Tesla, and many others declared that they would have autonomous vehicles deployed out to consumers by 2020. It's 2020 now, but we actually don't see self-driving cars roaming out on our streets quite yet. And why is that? So this is where I'm going to move into the social implications of autonomous vehicles. And the reason why the deployment has been much slower than anticipated is because people actually have died and there have been accidents that have happened. And the hard part for companies and society as a whole now is deciding when the tech is actually good enough. And a major contributor to the accidents that have occurred is due to a lack of proper communication between the businesses and the consumers. So to explain that a bit further, it's important to understand that there's actually various levels of automation, where level 1 is no autonomy and then level 5 is full automation. And what many consumers actually don't know is that it'll take decades until self-driving cars actually reach full autonomy and are available for consumer use. And so A lot of the accidents have occurred because people are trusting and relying the technology much more than the technology is actually ready for. In other words, they're treating level 3 partial automation as if they were fully automated. And then this kind of miscommunication can be partially attributed to consumer ignorance, but also heavily to the ways in which marketers have overhyped autonomous vehicles and autonomous tech in the past few years. So, the reality of self driving cars is that time is necessary. Companies are beginning to take much more cautious approaches, trying to test every situation imaginable for machine learning software to process. And it's also going to take time for consumers to become more knowledgeable about the levels of autonomy and how to properly use this technology. So, what can be expected from the future of autonomous vehicles moving on? Um, there are currently a lot of difficult decisions being made, things like ethical decisions where developers need to decide who's going to die when there's only one of either the pedestrian or the driver who could be saved, or decisions on policy and regulations where the government, the public, and companies developing these technologies have to come together to decide just when exactly people and the technology are ready for autonomous vehicles to come out onto the market. So, in response to these difficult decisions and problems that have been arising, companies have begun to collaborate more and more, which will definitely lead to a much faster deployment than if the companies were to tackle this enormous problem on their own. So that's a positive that came out of it. And although the shift towards autonomous vehicles may not come as soon as we anticipated, my belief is that the shift is inevitable. I talked previously about some of the positive effects, and the industry is anticipated to add $7 trillion to the global economy, but many people may lose their jobs, and there's also negative consequences that may come out of it. So, even as we move into a more automated world, the propagating effects of normalizing autonomous vehicles is still unknown. And to end off, I just want to highlight that the question we should be asking ourselves now is how might driverless cars change our day to day lives? And do our best to adapt and recognize the power, but also the limits of driverless cars. Thanks.